Okay. So for those who are just watching this to catch up a little bit, we're just swarming on what this topic is. I'm sharing my board, the Mira board, of what ways are we having to navigate a traditional waterfall environment. I put budget on there. I'm seeing some others, the sequencing work. And there is a good read also that was passed on, I think, from Ben. I don't know if I mentioned it in our last alumni, that Beyond Budgeting. I'm maybe halfway through it. Is it This is Beyond Budgeting or Introducing Beyond?
So he has written 2 books he has 2 books prior to this book is called This is Beyond Budgeting. He had 2 books prior that were a lot more in depth on how you do it. But
is it that Bjorn Bart?
Yes,
it's that Swedish name. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So This is Beyond Budgeting is, he said his goal was to get a book you could read in a coast-to-coast air flight. So it's very accessible and shorter, and it has comments to go to one of the other books if you want to go more detail on these things.
Yeah, it's really well, one, he totally gets it, and he just calls out the lunacy of saying we've planned all these things out with fixed budgets as if we know that's how things are really going to play out. Very experienced at senior financial levels. And then, yeah, that last point you made, Ben, it's very accessible and easy to read. So it's a good treatment. And it made me realize, like, I think everyone in some ways probably needs to be armed with the reality of we'll probably bump up against the finance group and the budgeting process at some point. And that's a nice piece of information to have. So appreciate you passing that on.
Does he manage, Ben, to sort of loosen up the annual process? You know, I think that's what gets in the way, is that I could see like starting with a quarterly recalibration or something like that, because, you know, public companies have so much quarterly alignment and everything, and even in private companies. So I'm curious, does he get to that sort of recadencing of the budgeting process?
Yeah, he basically, the major thesis is that you break apart a single number budget into forecasting targets, which are aspirational, forecast, which is what we think we can get done, and resource allocation. And you do those in concert with each other rather than setting a target at the beginning. That and of course, to your question, you reiterate on it, you iterate on it as you go along, but you don't set a single number that's based on all those 3 things that are dynamic amongst within themselves. And he also talks about how these things have to be relative, not targeted. A good example is, we're going to set a budget, we're going to set a target of 10% growth in sales, right? And then you get 10% growth in your sales. Well, what does that mean? You hit your target, but it turns out other people in your field had 20% increase in sales because this was a really good environment for this. So we hit our target, but we didn't really do what we should have done. Or a pandemic hits and we only got 2%. So yeah, we didn't hit our target, but we really did better than we thought we could do compared to other people too. So it's all talking about relatives and setting realistic relative goals rather than a single number at the beginning that is forward looking at a time when you have the least information about it. So my answer is yes, Colleen.
Yeah, thanks for the summary of that. I'm doing a little bit of grouping. I think there's a couple others. I know from the CAL we talk about structures, metrics, and policies. Or you might remember from you know, this is an outside-in approach. If we try to just say, here's our new process, and we don't ever change the culture. And I can feel maybe some of that. There might be other ways to kind of categorize it, because then you can see where we might have, I don't want to say starting point, but you're trying to size up what the work is ahead of you. Oh, Julie. Okay, thanks. Sorry you had to drop. You got the idea of where we're heading. So this is my take on, and I think what we're also shaping up is, what is it that you all come here for? And one thing that was a nice surprise that we learned this year is you partly all come here for connection, meet others. I think that's great. Where else can we meet all these like-minded people? But part of I'm also wondering, is it this new ideas? Is it, actionable takeaways, et cetera? So I'm interested to hear more about that. But from this standpoint, when I look at all these things we could do, then I'm still thinking, okay, but you got to walk away. Okay, so these next 2 weeks, what am I going to try to do? I'm going to try to move the needle on talking with the PMO director's mindset, or I'm going to question this policy we have in place, and do we really need that, and see where that goes. That's what's on my mind. But you might be looking for other takeaways. This also might not be your world. It's just a nice, engaging intellectual conversation. So happy to have that conversation. I'm going to move these up. There's a lot of work here. Anything that someone's put down that you want to comment on? I'm seeing a lot around process. Yeah, this is process again. I kind of wish Bob knew what was here, because go ahead.
I'm very curious about the mainframe teams. This is how we work, because at Pacific Life, it was the mainframe team that became the catalyst to the agile transformation. I actually wrote an article about it. So I'm curious just what that means, and if I can be a good ear or just understand. That's a very interesting one. There's a check mark too, which means maybe 2 people thought it was interesting.
I put my own check mark on there, Colleen. So I was like, I wanted to make sure that it was represented there. But yeah, I've been working with mainframe teams. Obviously, I think I commented to you that I started off as Pacific Life, and I worked on that mainframe system that they have over there. So I'm pretty familiar with mainframe teams. But I just wanted to bring up the topic of how do you convert these mainframe teams? And I know I had an approach, but I wanted to kind of find out what other people were thinking, because with this team, that's what they started with, is like, why do we need to change? This team was in essence being forced to take on Scrum, and I think it was, I can't remember, Travis, who used the word practice, which I really like, and is like, it's not methodology. It's more about how this team is working, and how can we get this team to, move towards that. And so I just wanted to toss it out there and see what ideas others have as far as moving forward with mainframe teams, or people who've been doing things the same way for a long time, and how they're getting those teams excited about Agile.
Well, first of all, I don't want to step over anybody else who might have an idea, but I have quite a bit of direct experience with this. And I can connect you up with somebody who used to be on the mainframe team that has become one of Pacific Life's strongest Agile coaches as well. But Dwayne, I guess the things that come to mind, I'm hearing in what you're saying, words like force and other things. And I just invite us to consider this. We started with what I call the coalition of the willing, right? Mm-hmm. And we went and asked teams what their biggest problem was. In this particular case, there was so I'm in the insurance industry, and you used to work for PL, so when you have a product that's an annuity and somebody dies, they make a claim on it, right? And it's a huge compliant, it's just a huge process in it. And it took manually, this process took the customer service team just 2 weeks to do a death claim. And yet this is a time when somebody has a loved one that's passed, but you want to be fast on it, right? And so the object of the business improvement was to shrink the timeline for the death claim to occur. And so, in working with this team, I went to them and didn't say, we're going to do Scrum, we're going to do Kanban. I just asked the question, what would make your life easier? And at that time, the business analyst that eventually became just a stellar Agile coach, she's just so phenomenal, said, look, there's like a 345-page requirements document. We have tried multiple times to move this puppy. and it's impossible, right? And so I asked, hey, well, without using the A word, I think that's one of Ben's favorite things too, is never drop in the word agile, just asking the question of, well, would it be possible? Is it possible at all to do this work in smaller chunks? And it really got her thinking. And, she and then another analyst figured out a way that, yes, we can do this in smaller chunks, but then how do we really make it happen? And so at that time, I talked to the person who was their director, and I said, look, Tina, your teams are intrigued by breaking big work down into smaller pieces. Would you be open to sending them to Scrum Master training, or just training that'll help them, do this? And so that was, we actually sent some of our first people years ago to Scott's CSM training. And those two analysts, like, something just clicked after the class. They're very bright people, they caught on right immediately. And they said, let's try it. And so then my job was to go and create safety with the middle management and the managers to say, now, can we give the teams a little autonomy to actually do this, right? And so that was a little bit of work, right? Because we were used to sort of, the management team was used to assigning people tasks and doing other things. I said, we've got these bright sparks. It's two of your top performers. Can you give them autonomy to run this and see what happens, right? And so working with them, eventually they became more comfortable with that idea. And it wasn't too long, because I said, look, what do we stand to lose? Nothing has gone out the door. So what do we stand to lose by trying this experiment? And, those two analysts just knock it out of the park. They're still some of the top performers there. They've gone on to do different things, but they still apply agile techniques. We got the first release out in 4 months, which wasn't too bad. It wasn't everything, but the second the business saw that, they were like, okay, what is this thing? Let's do more of it. And that became a really important catalyst to making it happen. And so I'll find that article, the business agility article, because it was the most beautiful story. And I decided to write it up in this kind of way that looked at the team very ecologically as this ecosystem that we needed to protect. So I'll send it out to this email list when I find it. And I just hope, I wish you luck there, because it was funny that, everybody thought, when I asked that question at different conferences, which team did you think started the agile transformation? Everybody said the web team, the IoT team, whatever. It was like, and well, sometimes things surprise us.
Yeah. Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah.
I like the story. I like that.
I was just going to add real quick, Dwayne, one of the things I've worked with kind of operation teams, shared service teams, that they always have this challenge of like, have us all this unplanned work and different types of things. So like, one of the things is like, I've used is like, hey, how is there a way we can help tell the story of your work? So typically it ends up being more of a Scrum-Bon approach, like from a mechanics perspective. But again, the whole philosophy behind that is like, how do we create transparency to the work so you can tell your story, what's on your plate, and you could use capacity and velocity to help say, hey, we're maxed and we're spending all our time in these different areas, and taking that ownership, and versus just feeling like you're just a ticky-taking group, and really start to own your kind of area. As I always like, how do we take a more of a product versus a project mindset with some of those teams? But anyway, that's some things I've seen work well.
Thanks, Travis. Yeah. And I think that's a good point, because I think that in our worlds, when we talk about, the UI, we talk about, other teams, they're usually consuming the work of these legacy teams. And so they're feeling very comfortable about the way that they've been doing it for a long time. And so it is more difficult, and they do have those other external influences. So getting that visibility on the work is extremely important. So yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, my thought on that, and this probably applies to a lot of these, and this is classic that I know a lot of us knows, what's the win for them? Are they, Cotter would say, is there a sense of urgency, but the personal level, like I think Adkar says, like, do they have awareness that they need to change individually? As thoughts, and I think when I'm keep reflecting on how I see some of these things, it's almost like value stream mapping. I know a number of people here are familiar with that. I've done that. And I realized like I'm actually always looking at the people, and it's almost like a value stream map of who's not really on board, that just, they're just hanging out, or they're not really wanting to. And I've dealt with that before. So I'm always watching. Some people are on fire, but there's other people involved to get this out the door who's just not really in on this. And that's who I want to quickly go to and say, so what's going on? Like if it was a lean manufacturing, you go and say like, why is this all this work piling up here? What's this inventory sitting here? But if it's a person, it's almost like emotionally like, why are you not in on this? I'm curious, right? And let's talk about that. And once they get on board, now things are flowing a bit more. So that's kind of the way I see it. Ben, your hand? What's up?
Yeah, just a real quick reminder about the kind of the key beginning concept of path to agility, which is the business outcomes. And I think part of that bringing everybody on board is to get an idea, some kind of consensus on what's the problem we're trying to solve. Why would we even do this? Are we having trouble with productivity? Are we having trouble with quality? Are we having trouble with employee engagement? Are we having trouble with being responsive to market changes? And each of those have different paths forward to improve. So I think maybe if there's a problem in bringing people on board, start with why in the world would we even do this? What's the problem we're trying to solve?
Good point. Yeah, that's the first question I asked when they asked me to engage with this team was, are they delivering? And everyone goes, they're delivering.
Yeah,
so what's the problem?
They're not using the agile words. Awesome. Oh, that's a great question to start with, Dwayne. I appreciate that. We have just about 5 more minutes to dig in a bit more on this and I think shape it back. So can I hear a bit more about, is there anyone else that still feels like this main question of navigating Agile, if this is one that got some votes, what's still a concern out there that we can kind of flesh out, dig into, and come back for a part 2 next time and bring some more ideas? What else is there to touch around that?
For myself, I've heard a lot of different individuals that I've talked with at different companies. They're like, yeah, we don't do Agile because we did Agile and it was left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And so my first thing is well, if you're doing Agile, you're probably not being Agile. It's really looking at, for me at least, it's looking at what is it that Scrum and Kanban and all these Agile methodologies, what is it that they're really trying to accomplish underneath? And is the team and the management really understanding that fundamental piece behind that? And does that align with their goals and objectives? So like in our case, they were stating, well, projects are not completing fast enough. And said, well, to fix that, we have to go to Agile. And how that got implemented, I don't think went very well, but they didn't address some of the underlying issues that we were seeing. Whereas if we'd addressed some of those underlying issues, that would have changed the conversation a bit.
Okay, I was trying to capture that, Steve. I think it's a really good point. If I put that down there, what's Agile trying to accomplish, and does management understand that? Is that what you were saying?
Like for me, so like I've done process engineering in the past. So to me, Agile flows really well into that. I'm trying to make things better. So I may have these ceremonies, but if I'm so focusing on the ceremonies and not what the ceremonies are trying to help me accomplish.
Right.
I think a lot of
I have to attend.
I think a lot of it depends on what level you're coaching at, right? If you're trying to convince a team or set up a team to be successful, or if you're trying to deal with leadership to, have them not only understand what Agile can deliver, but some of the, cost of transition and things like that. For me, if you just Google it, there's books on it, the powerful coaching questions. They don't even have to be Agile questions. Just start with that. I hate to say the cliche but I hear it like 8 billion times across the board. What is their burning platform? Kind of sick of that one, but it's, ask those questions, especially of leaders to get them to talk about, well, what do they perceive as problems? What do they perceive as bottlenecks in their organization? What do they perceive as things that they want to accomplish that they're not currently accomplishing with the teams and the people that they have, things like that. So if you start on that foot where you're getting them to answer those questions, where, what would you like to see a year from now in terms of, performance or value delivery or one of those things, and you can get them to engage in that level, then you can begin to talk about, well, here are some things that, a transition can deliver for you as you mature it.
I'm capturing that too, Scott, because I'm realizing there's kind of a pattern of that, because Ben mentioned P8, the business goals, you're saying like a year from now. I think these are good to come back to, like, but what are we trying to actually do? Ben, your hand was up, but then it went down.
It was a thumbs up.
Yeah, it was a thumbs up for what Scott was saying.
Excellent. Okay.
So Scott, can I just say that, I want to piggyback off of Scott's comment about the burning platform. And yeah, I don't know, it reminded me of the new episode of The Mandalorian. This is the way, the whole safe burning platform. So yeah, it does sound old, but burning, there's a fire, there's some sense of urgency around it. And so I don't know. I think it does help people kind of get going sometimes when they can't. So, yeah. But it's not a cliche, it's just more of a, how do we get started?
That reminds me, by the way, and we'll close with this, Dwayne, for those I know a number of us have been around for a while. I remember that time where I realized, like, people are using the word agile to mean something different than what it means, right? And you just saw, like, it went on and became something else that was not the original, the roots of that and the spirit of it, etc. And that once the horse left the stable, like, that's a beast. And I always felt bad using the words, like, I know this word doesn't mean what you think it means, but that's the word we're using now. Burning platform is kind of the same way. When I was like, no, it's still important to have a sense of urgency, but some of these words just get used and overused and they lose their meaning. And it's tough, because then what else can we use? Good point. All right, well, go ahead, Ben.
Real quick, using the business outcome kind of way of consolidating your thoughts, maybe a way of aggregating on that burning platform without challenging the people who are doing it, admitting that it's a burning platform. In other words, yeah. I may not want to admit that we're really in trouble, but if you have 9 business outcomes and all the people in there aggregate on 1 or 2 of them, then that comes out of that discussion without, kind of the connotation of that old meme of a burning platform.
Yeah, good point. Positioning on that. Well, if there's anything else, feel free to keep coming back to the board, put anything else there. I'll try to shape it and iterate and come back and ping some people on what does it look like to move that conversation forward, because there are a lot of good pieces out here I think we captured. I think there's more here and maybe more resources and direction. So if you've seen other things that help, add them to the board. And again, please give us feedback on what can help, what gives value to you that you would show up. I'm part of a number of communities, and there's some I show up to, and there's some I don't. And we're all looking for something different, but that feedback really helps us. We're glad to help provide a platform, connection, all that to help you continue to grow and move forward. So let us know. Anything else, any announcements, anything administratively to mention before? I know the big conference in May is in Portland, Scrum Gathering, for those who don't know. I don't know whether, is it Florida for the big granddaddy of them all, Agile 2023?
Orlando, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Do you know the details on the coaching retreat yet? Because I keep checking in on those. I know it's in Queensland, Australia, but that's about all I know.
That one I haven't. I honestly, I kept always checking, and I finally just stopped checking. So I haven't checked for a while, but I should. A coaching retreat would be cool. There was someone internally who said I might just host one myself and not even like worry about the Scrum Alliance official this or that, but just bring coaches together. So I'll ping them and say, hey, because I would be interested in that. I'm down with meeting with coaches. I just don't want to be under this. It's got to be structured this way and done all this way. And that doesn't fit me. So I'll circle back with you. I'll ping them and see, because they're a very respected name. I'd love to work with them on that too. So glad you're interested, Scott.
Yeah.
Anything else for anyone? All right, then we will leave it at that. Glad you all came. Hope to see you again. 2 weeks from now is the lean coffee version. And then the first Friday of April will be our pickup on this one, I think. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Happy Friday. Take care.
All right. Take care. Thanks for hosting, Scott.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dan.